Hey guys, in this video we are checking out this vintage-inspired 25mm prime lens from Pergear. Now, this lens currently sells for about $65, give or take. It's 100% manual and for aps-c cameras. So in this video, we will be testing it on my Fujifilm X-T4, but it's also available for Sony E mount, Nikon Z, Micro Four Thirds, and Canon RF. And by the way, Pergear did send this out to me free of charge for testing and reviewing, but they haven't paid me anything and they don't get to see this video before you do. So yeah, that's the way it is. Anyway, despite a few shortcomings, which is what you kind of expect from a $65 lens, I actually really like the footage from this lens and some of the quirks. It definitely has a more vintagey and a more organic look, and at the same time we don't see as much in the way of chromatic aberration as you might get on something like this, which is an actual vintage lens. The colors from this Pergear lens looks pretty nice, even if we're lacking just a tiny bit of contrast if we're shooting wide open, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Once again, it's something that we normally see on these types of older lenses, which I can only assume is what Pergear is kind of going for with this very lens. Now, I don't want to bore you with too much technical talk, but just, briefly mention a couple of things that I think can be kind of worth knowing about this lens. So first of all, we have 10 aperture blades, and we also have this tiny little 37mm filter thread here at the front for the included lens hood, which is kind of vented. So if you want to be able to do really fast panning shots, pan and follow shots, this lens hood won't slow you down more than absolutely necessary. We also have a clicked aperture ring, which feels nice and smooth with a range from f1.7 all the way up to f22. Now, the focus ring, on the other hand, it feels okay, but I've noticed that if you turn it around quickly, you can kind of feel the little cogs inside. At least I assume it's cogs from the focus mechanism. Not really a deal breaker or a super big issue, but I just never came across a lens where you can kind of feel the cogs in there, and it kind of depends on how fast you turn the focus ring, and if it's been sitting for a while, then it could be just a tiny bit stiff. It's not the smoothest manual lens I've ever worked with, and in that sense I would give this 6.5-ish, maybe 6.7 out of 10, which is once again what I kind of expect from a lens at this price point. As far as included items apart from the lens hood, we also get caps and this little nice neoprene bag that will protect the lens, something that I'm actually a fan of these types of pouches. It's great to have when you want to grab a couple of lenses, throw them in your messenger bag or what have you, and not having to worry about the lenses getting dinged up, scratched and dusty and stuck to a piece of, I don't know, candy wrapper or what have you. Now, before we take a look at flaring, something that's a bit of a specialty for this lens, I just wanted to briefly show you a couple of tests when it comes to sharpness, vignetting and distortion and that kind of stuff. If we start wide open at f1.7, we can see a decent amount of sharpness here in the center with a slight fall off towards the edges. As far as chromatic aberration goes, there's not a whole lot to report. Stop down to f2.8 and we get sharper edges and a tiny bit more contrast. At f5.6, it's looking pretty even, and we also get less vignetting, something we might be able to see better on this next image here. I don't know about you, but to me it feels just a tiny bit weird to put a lens like this on the test charts. After all, it's not made to kind of rival $2,000 prime lens or anything. It's made to be affordable, fun, with a tiny bit of character. In that sense, it kind of does and looks the way it's supposed to. I've also taken this out for some street photography, an area where I actually can see this lens being very fun to use. Now let's talk about some of the quirks that I've discovered. So first of all, and as we've seen, this is a very teeny tiny lens, and if you have slightly larger hands like I do, operating this lens can be just a tiny bit fiddly in the long run, especially if you're planning on using this for video where you might be racking focus just a bit more than you would if you were doing stills. And if you put the lens hood on here, or maybe you'll put a variable ND filter, the amount of space you get here to grip the focus ring is going to be even smaller and tighter. So something to keep in mind. The second thing that I want to bring up, which is kind of a pro and a con, but you know, I wanted to make this into a separate little section here in this video. So flaring, even with the lens hood attached, this lens will flare and veil quite easily. And you might find yourself often shading the lens, giving it a bit extra shade with your hand like this, just to get a bit more control over the image. Personally, I'm a huge fan of flaring and veiling. That's one of the reasons why a lens like this is fun and interesting to use. And I'm guessing that you have at least some interest in this type of character yourself, since you're watching this video about this lens, or maybe just like hanging out. And if that's the case, then welcome aboard. So how do we summarize this? Well, it's a super inexpensive lens that actually will allow you to kind of dip your toes into more vintage style or mechanical lenses without having to deal with the adapters and all of that stuff. The size can be a pro and it can also be a con. It's obviously going to make your setup way more pocketable, which is good if you're planning on doing some casual photography, street photography, or maybe even traveling. But like we talked about before, if you have bigger hands, you know, it's totally usable, it's totally workable, but it's just gonna be a bit fiddly, that's all. So maybe it won't be my go-to lens for street photography and travel photography and that kind of stuff, but definitely something that I will bring with me in this little pouch and keep in my bag, just to be able to change things up, have some fun, play around with the flares, and enjoy the character and the small size and all of that. And I definitely think they priced this lens accordingly for what you get. I think you actually get more than you pay for, which is always great. Now, if you're interested in this very lens and you want to take a second look at the available mounts and that sort of stuff, I'm going to leave some links down below to both Amazon and to Pergear's web shop, where you can pick one of these up for yourself. But yeah, that's gonna be it. So thank you so much for stopping by. I hope I will see you here again pretty soon. Take care and bye.